A woman alone, navigating the corridors of power in Tudor England, defiantly challenging the orthodoxy of state religion. Was her act one of bravery or treason? Anne Askew, recorded in court records by that name, was not of noble birth, yet she rose to become one of the most notorious figures executed under King Henry VIII, born in 1521. To Sir William Askew, a Lincolnshire landowner loyal to the crown, Anne received an education, a rarity for women of her era. But for her, education was not merely a privilege. It was a weapon. In a time when the distinction between religious reform and heresy was perilously thin, Anne embraced Protestantism with conviction, specifically rejecting transubstantiation, the Catholic belief that the bread and wine of the Eucharist transform into the actual body and blood of Christ. Questioning this doctrine was deemed a capital offense under the 1539 Act of 6 Articles. Her defiance was evident in her words, "I would rather read 5 lines in the Bible than hear 5 masses in the church," she asserted during her interrogations. These were not reckless provocations but deliberate challenges aimed at the heart of Tudor religious policy. By 1545, her public preaching in London, eloquent, articulate, and dangerously persuasive, caught the attention of Bishop Stephen Gardiner and Chancellor Thomas Wriothesley. These men, staunch defenders of Catholic doctrine amid the volatile religious landscape of Henry's reign, perceived Anne not as a misguided subject, but as a significant threat. She was not merely perpetuating heresy. She was undermining the monarchy's claim as the supreme head of the Church of England. The situation intensified with growing suspicions around Queen Catherine Parr, who herself had evangelical leanings and was perceived as sympathetic to Protestant ideals. Anne was arrested and interrogated, but after an initial release, they came for her once more. This time, she would not escape. In the words of John Bale, a contemporary Protestant, Anne was a virgin not only pure and undefiled in body, but also a pure virgin in the faith of Christ. This purity of conviction would soon lead her to confront England's most dreaded torture device, the rack. The rack. Anne Askew's brutal interrogation deep within the stone chambers of the Tower of London. Anne Askew was drawn into a realm from which few emerged unscathed. What ensued was a brutal act of state violence that astonished even a Tudor England already known for its gallows and blades. Having already been tried and condemned for heresy, one might expect that Anne's fate had been sealed. Yet her refusal to name others, especially the women at court suspected of sharing her Protestant beliefs, left her torturers unsatisfied. Chancellor Thomas Wriothesley and Sir Richard Rich, acting under the authority of the Privy Council, took an unprecedented step. They directly oversaw the torture of a condemned woman, an act not only legally questionable but extraordinary even by Henry VIII's standards. The rack, as specified in legal records, was designed to painfully stretch the body to the brink of severe joint damage. It was rarely applied to women, and never with such explicit political intent. Bound by her wrists and ankles, Anne endured excruciating torture, with her shoulders and hips dislocated painfully. According to her own account, chronicled by John Bale, she stated, "They did put me on the rack, because I confessed no ladies or gentlewomen to be of my opinion." She described how Wriothesley and Rich turned the wheel with their own hands, until the strength in my arms and legs was completely destroyed, yet even amidst this torment she yielded nothing. Although torture was technically illegal under English common law without royal consent, it had morphed into a shadowy instrument of Tudor authority, oftentimes justified by a royal warrant or deemed necessary for political expediency. Anne Askew's case blurred the fragile lines between judicial scrutiny and outright persecution. She was not tortured for information about herself, but to implicate others, perhaps even Queen Catherine Parr. Still, Anne's determination remained unbroken. "I had rather to die," she later wrote, "than to break my faith." Her defiance elevated her beyond mere heretic status. She became a symbol unyielding, even in her physical destruction. When they concluded their torment, she was so severely injured that she could no longer walk. They carried her broken, bound, and nearly lifeless back to her cell. The court, however, still demanded her execution. The rack had intended to make her compliant, but instead it immortalized her resolve. The cruelty inflicted upon her only fortified her conviction. Torture had failed, and all that remained was the final act of public execution meant to silence her voice once and for all. Public spectacle. The Smithfield burning, unable to walk due to her injuries. Anne Askew was transported to the stake in a chair, her body devastated by the rack, yet her spirit unshaken. It was July 16, 1546, in Smithfield, London, a historically notorious site for executions, especially of heretics. Here, under the gaze of nobles, clergy, and commoners alike, England prepared to enact its darkest rituals. However, this occasion was different, and Askew was not alone. 3 other condemned men, John Lascelles, John Hadlam, and John Hemley, shared her fate that day. But it was Anne who captured the crowd's attention. She was the first English woman known to be tortured in the Tower and then executed by burning at the stake. The brutality of her treatment had already spread through whispered conversations across the capital, and now the culmination of that violence, public and irreversible, was about to transpire. Tied to the stake with chains, her frail body too weak to stand. Records suggest a small support was fashioned to keep her upright. Beneath her, executioners stacked bundles of dry wood known as faggots, prepared to ignite flames that would hasten her demise. Eyewitness accounts describe her demeanor as calm and composed. She reportedly refused a final recantation. Bishop Nicholas Shaxton, a former Protestant who had reverted to Catholicism, was appointed to preach at the burning. Yet Anne paid him no attention, remaining silent throughout his sermon, her lips immobile. Her refusal to engage became a significant act of defiance in itself. A bag of gunpowder was tied around her neck, a common measure meant to hasten death and minimize suffering. As the flames were ignited, the crowd looked on. Remember that in Tudor England, burnings were not concealed acts, they were public spectacles, performed to instill fear. Anne Askew figure became the focal point of a grim execution meant to purge the nation of heresy. But rather than extinguish her, the flames ignited a powerful legacy. Anne Askew died without confession, without betrayal, and without fear. Her writings, preserved in the Examinations of Anne Askew, circulated widely among Protestant reformers. John Foxe later chronicled her story in his Acts and Monuments, declaring she was burned for the testimony of Jesus. The message was unequivocal: the state could destroy the body, but could not lay claim to the soul. Her suffering served as an indictment of England's violent religious policy, a policy so brutal it transformed a young woman into a martyr in the eyes of the realm. At Smithfield, Anne Askew's torment ended in the flames, yet from those ashes emerged one of the most poignant testaments of the English Reformation. The torture and execution of Anne Askew stand as a sobering reminder of the dangers faced by those who dared to question authority in Tudor England. Her ordeal was not merely a personal tragedy, but a striking revelation of the fierce struggle over conscience and belief in that era, an experience that laid bare both the brutality of power and the resilience of conviction. How do such instances of state-sanctioned violence reverberate through our concepts of justice and faith today? Share your thoughts in the comments. As Anne herself said, "I would rather die than break my faith."